So, baby blue is coming out today because yes, we're making pandesal. And as you all know, I really don't find myself a baker, but I've practiced this and failed it enough times that I can lay out all of the tips so that you too can have freshly baked pandesal in your own home. The biggest advice I have is that all of the times that I failed making pandesal, it was because I didn't closely monitor the temperature of my liquids. Per my yeast packet, it says to keep the liquid temperatures in between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit, as you just saw. And when blooming my yeast, I did use an entire 3-pack and I topped it with a sprinkling of sugar. After 10 minutes of waiting, your yeast should really bloom a lot, like you're about to see here. This was another thing that I think I messed up was one time I used a super old yeast packet. It might have already even been opened, so make sure that your yeast does grow at this point. I also just made sure that all of my measurements were exact by using a digital scale. I typically tend to ignore measurements in general, being that I prefer cooking a lot more than baking, and I feel like being 5 to 10% off doesn't necessarily doom you completely when you're cooking, but I guess it can in baking. So here I've measured out completely the all-purpose flour, sugar, and salt, and all of the measurements and directions are in the description below. By the way, this recipe is vegan, so I used 1 cup of oat milk and 3/4 cup of water, but I think you could probably use a different type of milk. Again, make sure your liquids are in that temperature range according to the yeast that you're using. Then you'll add vegetable oil and your now gargantuan amount of yeast and stir this together. And while a stand mixer isn't required, it is super helpful. In my ensaymada episode, I did not use a stand mixer, and instead my friend Kate and I took turns mixing and kneading, and that was fun too, but my friend Kate sadly isn't here today. So I did end up putting this in the stand mixer for about 5 minutes on medium. Pandesal is such an important bread for a lot of Filipinos. When I was growing up, we didn't have freshly baked pandesal per se, but my mom would buy the dinner rolls that were available to us from Costco, and I got used to having those every morning. But as I think about why pandesal is commonly eaten in the Philippines, that answer is interesting because the Philippines doesn't grow a lot of wheat. The Spanish did introduce breads, including pan de suelo, which was a bread cooked in a floor oven, hence the suelo. But breads became much more popular actually during the time of American colonization. And you can see here my dough was still sticky, but not so sticky that it couldn't stay together. And you don't want it to be too dry here because it's going to get a bit more flour in it during the kneading. And an unfortunate thing did happen here while I was filming because I simply don't have the first couple minutes of my kneading. I'm not sure if it was my flour covered hands just missing the record button, but I guess life goes on. I kneaded this for about 5 minutes and let the dough pick up flour from the mat, adding a little more as was necessary. And at this point, I'm thinking about all of my favorite Pandesal sandwich combinations that I'm about to have, like Filipino hot dog, corned beef, egg, or even just a Kraft single. Let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite thing to have with Pandesal? Next, this little baby is going to go in an oiled up bowl for its first proving. A trick I picked up from my friend Kate is to put a saucepan of hot water into the oven so that it makes a nice warm environment. And you can even replace the hot water as the time goes on. This proves for about an hour and a half or until it doubles in size. And from this, we're going to be portioning the dough into 16 pieces or more if you prefer. As I've referenced before, during American colonization, teachers instructed students to lead a healthy and hygienic life at home by eating a healthy American diet, which just so happened to be aligned with the things that America was selling to the Philippines, like flour and canned dairy. And today, Southeast Asia, particularly the Philippines, are top importers of US wheat. In one of the articles referenced below, an agricultural analyst said that, quote, "The Philippines has long had very close ties with the United States. I wouldn't call it a captive customer, but it is a former colony of the US." Like, I really did not expect to be caught off guard with such a quote in an article about flour. Then I kneaded each little portion, and then sort of pulled and pinched the bottom pieces together so that it makes a nice, smooth pandesal. Then I placed it in the breadcrumbs. I'll show you that again a little closer up. You can also roll the entire piece of dough into the breadcrumbs, but I was fine with just the top. These proved for a second time for about an hour, although depending on your humidity and temperatures in your kitchen, that might be different. After baking these for 13 minutes at 400 degrees, here's what we got. And these are really the absolute best when you've just baked them. And you can fill pandesal with lots of things, but for my first one, I spread some cocoa jam on here, and this is really as good as it gets. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content from me, make sure to like this video and to subscribe to The Sago Show. My name is Rachel. Salamat!